So, ich glaube, jetzt sind wir live. Guten Morgen aus Zürich. Und ich möchte Sie alle recht herzlich begrüßen zum heutigen Webinar zum Thema Next Best Action und Decisioning. Und ich werde jetzt auf Englisch wechseln, weil unser Sprecher Englisch ist. Und wenn ich ihn einführe, dann sollte er verstehen, was wir sagen. So I switch to English now. Welcome Neil, also who's currently in home office in the UK. As you can see from the beautiful armchair, how you would expect an English home office to look like. And I'll give you a very short introduction before we start into the look and into the two cases. When we joined Merkle and Dentsu in 2018, at the end of 2018, one of our reasons to do that as Namics was to add additional competence, add additional fields of competence to what we as Namics can do. And one of the fields that has been very strong for us also in interaction with our former Namics clients is the field of data and decisioning. And what we wanted to do now is to bring that to a broader audience, not just the clients we already work for, and ask Neil and the Merkle team to present us a couple of cases that are specifically relevant to the financial industry. And we just made a pick where we said, okay, that we have a lot of clients in that area. I'm the client service director responsible for financial services. So that's why I'm hosting this. And we asked Neil and the Merkle team to bring actually two cases, one from a bank, Royal Bank of Scotland, and one from an insurance company that is HomeServe. Neil actually started his career as a personal banker, as a financial planner back in the days. And then, if I got it correctly, some of his potential clients or clients that he served as a banker had an IT company and said, I will buy your product, but more important, you come to me, work for me. And join this IT field, and that's where he spent the rest of his career, or the after that, or the career after that, mainly with the topic of decisioning. And he's worked for a lot of clients, among them for the two that are that he will present us today, but also, for example, for German ones like Vodafone in Germany. So he's a lot of experience in that field of next best action and decisioning, and is vice president decisioning for Merkle. And now, I think without further ado, I would ask Neil to start, and maybe one small remark. If you have a question on the way, if anything is unclear, put the question in the chat box. You should see in the GoToWebinar control panel. And just ask the question there. We'll monitor it during the talk and ask if there is something that's really urgent. We'll ask it right away, and otherwise we'll ask it at the end. And no question will remain unanswered. Just put anything that is unclear into that box there, and you can do that in German and in English. So we'll monitor that and see what comes and ask the questions. So now, really, without further ado, welcome Neil, and we're really interested in hearing about those two cases.
Thank you, Tim. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. As you can see from the screen, the topic is next best action decisioning within the context of omnichannel. Next best action decisioning has been around for quite a while now. The ability to use rules and models to present the correct things to customers at the point of interaction at any time. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that means to us, and we're going to position it within the context of omnichannel. Omnichannel as a term has been around less time than next best action decisioning. It's been around probably for the last 5 years or so, and as always happens with new ideas that come along, it takes a little bit of time for them to bed in and for people to align around a particular way of thinking. So we're going to give you an overview of what we think true omnichannel next best action decisioning is. And to do this, I'm going to present in 3 stages. First thing I have is a presentation which comes from the Royal Bank of Scotland, which has recently been renamed to the NatWest Group. So I'm going to take you through their journey within next best action decisioning and how they use an omni-channel decisioning capability to deliver. I'm then going to just pause, having presented RBS, and give you the elements of true omni-channel decisioning, what I think they are, and there are 3 key elements to it. And then finally, I'm going to put up a few slides for an organisation we work with called HomeServe, a UK insurer. And one of the key questions we get asked is, okay, this looks really good, how do we start? So I'll give you an introduction to how HomeServe started their journey into next best action decisioning, which is very, very typical of the way that we work with organisations. So the Royal Bank of Scotland is the UK's largest bank, 19 million customers, and they work across personal, commercial and private banking and capital markets. Every organisation that we work with has its interesting points, and one of the things about RBS that makes it interesting, not so much unusual, but there are multiple brands that we work with in next best action decisioning. Alongside RBS, we have NatWest, Ulster Bank, 1 or 2 of the smaller banks, Coots, where the Queen banks. So we have 6 or 7 distinct brands that are all working together within a single decisioning capability. And we see that quite a lot. We have one client, a Swedish bank with 59 distinct banks all working together within a single decisioning environment, gaining economies of scale from working together, but at the same time personalizing so that every bank gets what it needs. And it's not unusual for insurance companies to work in this way as well with the agency model. It's quite normal for insurance companies to have a centralized capability around things that they want to present, but then at the same time have the ability to allow agencies to personalize in a way that works for them. So multiple organizations working within a single decisioning capability, not unusual. This slide and the next slide adds a couple of images that were taken from slides presented by RBS over the last 4 or 5 years. And when RBS kicked off their next best action journey, they started by saying back in the 1970s, banks were very good at knowing their customers. They typically knew their customers through the branch manager. The branch manager had a good relationship, personal relationship with many of the customers, and customers felt as though the bank knew them because of that. They remembered what customers said, and the bank made it feel personal. They had a personal relationship. What then happened as banks started to move out and have communications through multiple channels is the personal touch started to disappear. So you see in the center, typical bank today, we lost the personal touch. And then on the right, we have what RBS was aiming for, RBS tomorrow, to try and use a single decisioning brain to replicate what the bank used to do in terms of that personal touch. So at the point of interaction across all of the different channels, how can we use a single brain to reintroduce that personal touch and make customers feel as though the bank really knows them? And the interesting thing about this image is it comes from a deck, as I say, a few years ago. And when RBS folk present this, they now say this is the point we have reached. RBS tomorrow, according to this slide, is RBS today. So RBS is now able via 25 channels to push out next best action recommendations to the point of interaction, typically in real time, and give their customers a really good personal experience. So the second image we have, which is used internally very, very widely by the RBS team and presenting on the speaker circuit, is an image to describe how the omnichannel decisioning brain works. So what RBS are very, very keen to do is use a single brain to make consistent, relevant and timely recommendations. The single decisioning brain is able to look at everything that's happening in the data environment of RBS, look at all of the events, everything that's happening that's transactional, behavioral, and decide what to do. So the system has been trained. Here are all the things that we want the single brain to look at and learn from. And then, given what's happening in the data environment, here is how we respond. Here is how we decide what we want to present, how we're going to present it, how we prioritize things, and then we monitor everything that's happening as we communicate to customers. And we communicate across a range of things: sales messages, service messages, marketing messages, a whole range of things. And as we communicate, we watch to see what happens and we learn. And sometimes when things are going extremely well, the communications are landing and they're working, we'll do more of that type of thing. And occasionally we learn that a particular style of communicating or a channel or particular messages don't work so well with some groups of customers, and we adapt. We find other ways forward. So a single decisioning brain making timely recommendations. This is the point that we've reached. We've been working with them for the last 5 years. We have just gone past 27 channels now. So we're rolling out channels at the rate of a new channel every couple of months. One of the things that makes that possible, it makes it relatively straightforward to deliver channels at a high velocity, is we are reusing the same single decisioning brain, which is the omni-channel capability. So RBS, like many organizations, has a vision for how they want customers, how they want the customer experience to be delivered, personalized, relevant, joined up. And in order to do that, the omni-channel capability is the system response. Because we have that brain that we are reusing in an omni-channel way, we don't have to continually reinvent the wheel, build lots and lots of new capabilities. We reuse a capability that already exists. And we just add on the extra channels and say, for the new channel, what do we need to know in terms of how we present MBAs to that channel? So projects are relatively quick and channels are introduced relatively often. So what is this single decisioning brain? If we go into the way the MBS decisioning capability works and just look at the first layer, what we have is 5 key constructs, 5 big ideas that exist inside the decisioning capability. The first thing that we have is we can see all of the propositions of the organization, all of the things that RBS wants to present to its customers and the customers of all 6 banks that we work with. So propositions can be marketing, sales, service, data capture, information, messaging. There's a whole variety of things that we want to present, but we hold them in one place. We then have personalization, which again is very topical at the moment, often called hyper-personalization. But we're looking at every customer and saying, for this customer, what is the right way to present each proposition? Based on customer value, where the customers are in their journeys, their life cycles, what channel they're in. There's a variety of reasons why we might personalize one way or another. But what we're trying to do is recognize within the single brain all of the different ways of personalizing the different text, the different images, and we're trying to say, for this customer in this channel at this time, with everything we know about them, here is how we construct the personalization in order to maximize the number of positive responses at the point of interaction. So we have a site of all the propositions. We can personalize in many different ways. We then, at the point of interaction, want to try and arbitrate across all of the different personalized propositions that are available to us. And a personalized proposition is a next best action. So that's how we construct the term NBA, next best action. It's a personalized proposition. And we will look holistically at all possible combinations of propositions and personalizations for each customer. We'll filter through them and we'll sort them into the right order using an arbitration stage, which includes a couple of key constructs. We have a relevancy model, which looks at, out of everything we could present to the customer, what do we choose to present today for this customer in this channel? What is the right thing? What things do we think are going to be of most interest? And then we prioritize. We put things into what we think is the right order. Having done all of that, we take a step which RBS has spent a lot of time with, which is considered timeliness. So we deliver decisioning to many channels, and one of the channels we work with is the mobile channel, which was always successful. it was always delivering personalized messages to customers. But when we introduced decisioning, we also said we want to focus heavily on the timing when we present messages, not just the messages we think are correct. So we're going to look at every element of the conversation we've had with a customer over time, everything we've learned about conversations with all customers, and say, when should we present this? And interestingly, when we delivered decisioning timeliness, we saw a 37% increase in response rates, take rates via the mobile channel. RBS is very open in terms of sharing their results because their results are incredibly impressive. And I have a slide a little bit later on, and I'll put up the Wheel of Fortune, which shows the types of positive results that we've seen out of RBS. The final stage we have in the decisioning process is channel selection and what we do with the channel. So every channel wants to deliver next best action messages slightly different to the other channels. Some channels are pushing out one NBA at a time, like SMS. Some channels, like email or web or mobile, want to push out a group of MBAs to the same screen, to the same point of interaction. So one of the things that we have is a construct called container logic. And what we're doing is asking the question, if we're promoting a group of MBAs to the point of interaction, for example, 4 MBAs are going onto the web homepage, how do we decide what is the correct group? And then, given that the customer's looking at a group of MBAs, how can we direct the customer to responding to the MBA that we would like them to respond to continue a journey? So we're going to look a little bit at container logic and how that has progressed within RBS. To do all of this, we're going to take a customer, Max. So meet Max. Max is a typical RBS customer, has been with them for a while. He's a main banker. RBS is able to, through the decisioning logic, recognize which customers are main banking customers of RBS. He banks online. He doesn't bank with mobile yet, and he's given us some marketing permissions which feed into the customer contact strategy for RBS, and the customer contact strategy will help to drive the omni-channel capability, particularly around timeliness. So we'll use 3 channels just to talk a little bit about Max and his experience. We'll go on to a call center to look at an agent. We'll go to mobile, and then we'll talk a little bit about web. Max is contacting the contact center. He has a reason to speak to the contact center, and the agent is presented immediately with a next best action. We can see on the screen that the omni-channel decisioning capability has looked at everything we could present to Max and all of the different ways of personalizing, and said for Max at the moment, we think we need to ask him about his mortgage, which he has elsewhere. RBS is very, very good at recognizing in data the patterns that suggest there are savings accounts or mortgage accounts or loan accounts elsewhere. They're able to suggest, to predict when loans or mortgages are likely to come to an end at other organizations and jump in and present next best actions in a timely way. So we're saying we can see Max has a mortgage somewhere else. Does he have 10 minutes to talk about it, see if we can save money? That's not something Max is keen to talk about at the moment. So in responding, when we capture the not interested response, the decisioning engine will re-decision in real time. And again, with everything we know about Max, plus what we've just learnt about Max, we will present the next best action, personalized proposition. And this time we're saying, did you know you can save time using the mobile app? And this is something that is interesting to Max. He's considered using the mobile app, so he's going to take a look at that. So if we move on from the agent channel and we look at the app, Max is interested, so he registers and he can then go in and start using the mobile app. One of the screens that he's presented with gives him immediately the list of the accounts that he has, his balances. But there's a couple of other things on the screen that are particularly interesting from a decisioning perspective. The first one at the top of the screen is a container. And this is a container that holds a single MBA. And this MBA is presenting a message that says, you can make payments of up to £250 with a simple sort code and account number to people that you know. And if you want to find out more, click here. So we're starting to introduce Macs to how mobile banking works and the benefits of using it. The other thing that we have at the bottom is next to the apply button, a comment new. So this is the thing that draws Max's eye to begin with. So we click on that and it takes us across to another screen which has a series of tiles. And again, each of these tiles is a container. And what the container is doing is holding the logic which knows which next best actions are relevant to that tile. So if Max was to click on overdraft, he'll be able to find out more about the next best actions that RBS has for him around overdrafts. Loans the same, credit cards the same. We have a variety of things that we can offer him if he's interested. The one that interests him is loans. So he clicks on loans and we come through to the loan screen. The decisioning system is running algorithms, models all the time, and what it's giving us is a notification that Max has already been pre-approved for a loan. He can borrow up to £2,000 over 5 years, and if he wants to apply, he can go ahead. So this is not unusual. It's something which many banks can do. What we're doing here, though, is we are using a single omni-channel decisioning capability, which is potentially running and potentially able to push this message out to up to 25 channels. And it is looking at Max and looking at all of the things that we can possibly present and saying, given that we want to present a range of things to him, what would be the loan recommendation as part of this holistic way of presenting? So he's interested, he's going to apply for that. So we have two channels working together with a single set of decisioning logic. And as we capture all of these responses, they are held internally within the interaction history of the decisioning capability, and all of the learnings that we have in real time will inform the next set of decisions. So what are we looking at? We are looking at a journey, which is one of the RBS customer journeys. This is around mobile adoption, onboarding, engagement. So what you saw to begin with was, starting in the call center, the adoption stage within the mobile journey. We wanted to raise Max's awareness, and we have a few different ways of doing that depending on how we want to present to him across different channels. And what we're trying to do within the adoption stage is get Max to say, that's interesting, I'm going to take a look at that. The next stage, onboarding, what we have is a series of MBAs, a group of MBAs that we will land predominantly in the mobile channel, but it can be across other channels as well, during the early days of Max's onboarding in journeys. You saw the first message, which was, hey, you can make payments to friends, to family, up to a certain amount. So we're starting to educate him. And there are a series of that type of message to get him comfortably embedded into the idea of the mobile app, before we then move on to engagement, which is, okay, he's in, he's settled, he's comfortable, we can see him using it. Let's widen out the benefits of mobile, and let's try cross-selling one or two things as well through the mobile app. There are other stages to the journey. If we feel that he's starting to use the app less, then we might recognize that as dormancy, and we might want to do something about that to try and get him re-engaged into the app. So that's the journey that's running, and what we're effectively doing is daisy chaining together, joining together a series of MBAs in order for the mobile experience to be as positive as possible for Max, and of course to optimize revenue streams to RBS, which includes not just selling things but also moving some of the interactions that Max would typically have with the more expensive channels across to the cheaper channels. So those containers, we spoke about container logic, and I brought up the first container as we looked at the mobile app. Royal Bank of Scotland is an organisation that we've worked with for many years, and back in 2010 we spent some time looking at container logic and how we could best construct containers and multiple containers in order to optimize the process and maximize the number of positive responses. We found a lot of interesting things with container logic, and RBS has something called container personality. They recognized that there were probably about 17 different types of container that they had across their channels. And by combining the containers correctly at the points of interaction, they were able to get the customers to respond more positively more often. So in the mobile app, we have a few different styles of container. On the left, we have service outages. So if we have messages that we absolutely must push to customers for some reason, they get presented via the decisioning system as the customer logs in. We have containers which are very service-based. What RBS have realized is if you have an account-based screen with a series of balances, we get much better responses if the first container presents service-based messages. Customers tend to go a little bit blind when they see sales messages presented quickly. So we've avoided doing that. We present service messages first. What we've also found is if within that account-based screen we want to present sales messages, they can be very effective, but we do them further down. It gets more positive responses. So that tends to be a footer container with sales MBAs rather than putting it at the top. Then we have the apply tab, and I showed you the tile-based containers. And each of these tile-based containers in real time is saying, hey, what do we want to say to the customer about overdrafts? What do we want to say about loans, etc. Sometimes we have something we want to present, and occasionally it's multiple things, and they're there for the customer to click on. Sometimes we just don't have anything specific that we want to present, and that's an equally important message, because if the customer feels that we are trying to push everything at them all the time, then again, they just go blind. The experience is a poor one. So RBS is carefully helping the customer through the journey and helping to improve the experience of the customer at all points. Just moving on to the web, because the container construct extends into the web very well. There are multiple channels, web, email, mobile, where we have multiple touch points. So we have on the website the home page, the savings page, mortgage page, loan pages. Each of these different touch points has their own groups of containers. And on the account summary, again, a little bit like on the mobile one, we have service messages predominantly on the first screen, but we have variations. We've found that by putting on the right-hand banner service messages and having a call to action with imagery, that gets a good response. Again, we don't, on the right-hand banners, tend to put sales messages. It tends to be more service messages. There was a very successful campaign that was run by RBS several years ago, where on the account summary screen, they tried putting a sales message at the top and a service message on the right-hand banner. And the sales message might be, hey, we have a great new 3-year fixed mortgage, click here to find out more. And the right-hand banner would say, if you ever need any help around mortgages or loans in general, your mortgage advisor is called Jim. You can get him on this number, click here. And what we found was by putting a sales and a service message together in combination, customers would very often avoid clicking on the sales messages they didn't want to be sold to. But a service message which offered help in that type of area got a very good response. So the combinations of containers, combining different styles of MBA, but helping to guide the customer through a process in a way that we have found works through modeling and through learning from customers, is something that RBS does quite a lot. Then we have a number of different types of containers across the account page and other pages. Text-based with calls to action. Sometimes we have positive and negative calls to action. Alongside accounts, we very often land pseudo accounts. So bullet 4, if we can see a list of accounts, then what might be an account that we would want to promote in line with those. That tends to get quite a good response, in this case, e-savings. We then have account-based NBA messages, number 6. So listing out the accounts and adding a message which is supplementary to a given account works extremely well. and using imagery and text across the different screens. As I say, we identified probably about 17 different personalities, and then at the points of interaction, the art is how to combine NBAs in groups of containers using things like compatibility rules and conflict rules to make sure that we get things working correctly as a group, to maximize the number of positive responses, to improve the experience that the customer receives. So I promised you the Wheel of Fortune. Not every organization will present how well they're doing. The decisioning program, Olympus in RBS, has always been an overwhelming success, and as a result, RBS typically very happy to present how they're doing. I mentioned the 37% uplift as soon as we delivered timeliness through decisioning. There are a number of metrics on here. I'll point out 2 or 3. NBA decisioning has led to a 5 times increase in lending applications through digital channels. So we're able to look at what's resulting from customers seeing things via the mobile channel that are being presented, and then collecting the information and joining back to show the stimulus from decisioning has resulted in a greater number of sales. Going around the wheel, a couple more I'll present. 9.5 million decisions daily, which we're presenting, which is being pushed out to 25 channels. We're up to 13 channels in private banking, which is the consumers. One other I'll mention, which is the next one on the wheel. 72% application rates doubled despite 72% rationalization. So what this is saying is, it isn't necessarily true that by pushing out lots more MBAs, we're going to have the greatest degree of success. What is true for RBS is they reached a point where they said, let's be smarter. Let's think more about the MBAs we're pushing out, when we're pushing them out, the channels we're pushing them out to, and how we learn from success. And what they found was by reducing the number of MBAs by 70 down to 72% of where they were, and being smarter, they actually doubled application rates. So again, I think that feeds into the how do we deliver the right customer experience using an omni-channel decisioning capability, and how do we benefit from that? So I'm going to stop on RBS there. Very, very big success story in the MBA decisioning world. And I'm just going to move on to a quick description of what we think true omni-channel decisioning is. It has 3 components. And this is the technical slide, if you like. There's an orange background, a green background, and a blue background. On the orange background, you have a single decisioning brain, which is the first part of an omni-channel capability. We want to make sure that at the point of interaction, when the customer sees an MBA, the personalized proposition, there is a single brain making all of the decisions. What are we going to present, the proposition? How are we going to present it, the personalization? And then how do we group MBAs correctly across all of the containers we have at this point of interaction? One brain making all the decisions. As soon as you introduce a second brain, or you have multiple brains, you lose the value of being able to land the correct MBAs and learn from them, because you can't quite reconcile which brain is accounting for what element of success. So a single decisioning brain for MBAs is crucial. We then have 2 additional constructs. We want to have a single set of propositions, single set of things that we want to present to a customer, and allow the brain to make the decision about what we're going to present at this time. It doesn't necessarily follow that the decisioning system is hosting propositions. We typically interact with product catalogs in organizations which have been in place for many years, and they are the system of record for products. But we want to consume learnings from product catalogs, and we want to pull that in, create propositions from them, so that at any point of interaction we can find the right proposition. The first 2 parts of an omni-channel decisioning capability are relatively easy to achieve. Next best action decisioning with a single brain is straightforward. Most organizations can get to that. Providing a single set of propositions to a single brain in order to find the ones for the customer. Again, relatively straightforward to do. The one that tends to be the challenge is around personalization. And I think the organizations over the next 2 or 3 years that get this right will lead the space in omnichannel decisioning. Personalization, the way that we want to present, organizations will have very often multiple CMS systems. There's very often a way of presenting which is used for the email channel, the mobile channel, the web channel. Very often have their own ways of presenting. They're not necessarily joined up, and they're not joined up at all with the assisted channel. Digital tends to go its own way, assisted gets left behind. But what we're trying to do is create MBAs which tell the story to the customer. They have a conversation with the customer, and to do that, we want to try and personalize, which is entirely consistent across every single channel at every point of interaction. So if this single decisioning brain is able to see what we're presenting to the customers in all channels at all times, we want to learn from that and make sure the imagery and the text is correct and joined up. So we have organizations who are working towards this right now, and I think this is going to be a big battleground, and over the next 2 or 3 years, organizations that are able to pull together the learnings from maybe multiple CMS systems and have a single way of personalizing, which is available to a single brain, which will then create, I think, the optimal decision, are the ones that are going to benefit from this the most. So 3 key elements to omnichannel next best decisioning. Final part of the presentation, I mentioned that I was going to talk a little bit about HomeServe, which is a UK insurer. And this is because every organization who starts on an omnichannel MBA decisioning journey needs to find the right place to start. And HomeServe is an organization we've been working with for a few years now. It's a UK-based domestic insurer. They have also, I think, 5 other locations around the world. And they have about 2 million customers. And when we started working with them and said, okay, we want to find a way of delivering something within the first 2 or 3 months so that we can get enthusiasm, we can get excitement, we can get you learning how the system works. The business imperative, the thing that was of most importance to them, was retention. Being an insurer, they have a contract-based business. They have approximately 200,000 customers coming into market every month, and they want to retain those customers. But because of the nature of their business, they're a domestic insurer. They cover things like electricity, gas, boilers. They get very busy through the winter as pipes burst. They get lots of claims. They're trying, based on their model, to retain customers on the highest possible price. And for many years, they'd been working with spreadsheets, and they were saying to agents, try presenting at this price. If you can't get that price, try this price. And if you can't save them on the 3rd price, then we can't save them. So we introduced a desktop with a decisioning capability behind it that was able to look at the customer and able to look at the potential value of a customer for each possible contract, and then say, given the potential value, what should the pricing be? So that was the starting point. And we delivered the first engagement over 6 weeks. 1 business objective, retention, 1 channel, which was the call center agent. A very good place to start. The 6 weeks was split into a series of sprints. We had 3 sprints, each of 10 days. I'm not going to go into these in detail. I'd be very, very happy to take anybody through them offline if you would like to. But the important thing here is when we deliver, we want to get to business value quickly. We want to get to a point where we have a solution in and showing returns for the customer. But also, within this first period of time, 6, 7, 8 weeks, we want the customer to go on the journey with us. I've highlighted here 3 points in time: end of week 1, where we prototyped; end of week 3, next version of the prototype; end of week 5, final version of the prototype. A good decisioning capability will allow us to share with our clients on a very, very regular basis what we're building. so that that can then be taken by the client back into the organization, and the evangelist can share and show that we are making progress through the delivery phase. And the fact that we're sharing gains interest, gains excitement, allows us to continue. And it also starts to elicit, tease out lots of ideas about how a solution might be used. And that's incredibly important, because one of the things that we're trying to do over this first couple of months, as we land the first deliverable, is start the conversation about what a program of projects might look like, which is ideally going to be based around all of the great ideas coming out of the organization as we deliver. So my final slide, we delivered into 150 call center agents in 6 weeks a capability that allowed them to recognize customers who were coming towards the end of a contract. We were able to look at 500 new insurance products, find the ones that we would recommend the agents talk about, and provide multiple levels of pricing for each of those products. And sitting behind the decisioning capability was a price elasticity model that we built, and it had 100 price points for each contract. And what we were able to do was find the optimal price point for each customer based on the likelihood they would accept and the models that had run previously for previous customers. So there's a little bit of information in the top left-hand corner around the ROI. We were able to demonstrate for this particular short engagement an ROI, a return within 3 months. So the first engagement paid for itself within 3 months. And one of the interesting things about this, just to finish off, was we were never asked to increase the number of retentions, although we did. What we were asked to do was increase the price point that we could have expected for each saved customer. And what we were able to demonstrate through modeling was there was a net gain of £100,000 a month based on higher price points, based on the models we're able to produce, which sat behind the decisioning capability. So I'm going to stop there for now. I've been talking for quite a while. Tim, if I hand back over to you, I'm happy to take any questions that we have.
Yeah, we actually do have a couple of questions. Thank you all for entering those, and I will ask them to Neil now. So one was regarding, you mentioned a case where you had different banks cooperating, seeing how reluctant banks typically are to share data. How do you suggest getting them to collaborate on that level? And I wasn't sure whether you meant the Swedbank model, where it's actually one central entity and then affiliate banks, or whether you meant true sharing between even competitors, sharing.
Not so much competitors, although that would work. This is quite a common model. It's surprising how often we have multiple legal entities, multiple banks, multiple insurance companies working together within the same decisioning capability. So when we engaged with RBS as a group, which is now NatWest Group, was 6 banks that all work together. So if you go into the RBS decisioning brain, you will see a list of approximately 700 propositions, 700 things that RBS wants to present, mortgages, savings, loans, etc. But each of those mortgages, savings, loans is equally usable by NatWest, by Ulster Bank, and by each of the banks. The way
these are all banks under the same group, so it's
the way we personalize is entirely different. So when we're called by the RBS homepage or the NatWest homepage, you're going to see obviously totally different messaging going back. You mentioned Swedbank. Swedbank is a bank in Sweden with about 4 million customers, but they're building their decisioning stack to host 59 banks, Swedbank themselves, but also the 58 Swedish savings banks. So we're going to have banks which range from 5,000-10,000 customers up to 4 million customers, all within the same stack. That allows, in this case, a number of banks who are smaller, who couldn't necessarily have their own decisioning capability, to benefit from the scale of all working together, while at the same time doing the same as we're doing in RBS, which is ensuring that each bank is able to create their own personalization and create their own aspects of certain propositions. And at the points of interaction, we know whether it's inbound or outbound, which of the banks we're working with, so we can make sure that we personalize correctly. Works in exactly the same way in insurance. You can have an insurance organization which has 50, 60, 70 agencies that are maybe across 2 or 3 or 4 countries. And we need to make sure that the insurance organization centrally is able to create and master all of the things that they want to present. Then they can allow all of the agencies to access those and get them personalized and get them working for specific agencies for their groups of customers. It's very, very common. It's surprising how often we do that. The scale can be quite large.
Okay, thank you very much. And then there is another one. How do you control the temporal aspect of competing propositions? So once I've proposed X, how long do I wait until I can propose Y? I mean, we all have this thing in mind where we get 5 letters from the same company in the mail the same day. Yeah. Is there a way to control that or to make it sensible from a client perspective?
Yes, it's test and learn. So a big part of the timeliness of RBS is we are presenting things to RBS customers all the time. And we have first the need to recognize how many times we're presenting things and the positive responses we get. And we also need to recognize the positive and negative responses we get, how long it takes for us to get them, and how long after a positive and negative response do we present them again. And it's all down to test and learn. So we have the ability through modeling to recognize the passing of time, to recognize the different types of stimulus around the impressions that we make and the responses we get. And the system is learning all the time. What we will also do regularly is test what the system's telling us against other ideas that we would have. A/B testing, champion, challenger. We're always trying to find the optimal unknown number of positive responses in any scenario. We'll never know it for certain. But when we get into a routine where we can see something's working very well, we will then say, okay, it's working well. Let's just take a small number of customers and test a different way of approaching this. If we were to approach it with different time-based elements, what response would we get? So we can always find, we can always validate the approach we've taken or switch to a new approach. So it's test and learn, it's model-based, and it comes from looking at the entire customer base over time.
So there's not a hard rule that says, okay, once I've presented proposition A, I have to wait 2 days, 5 days, 2 weeks until I present proposition B, but it's really depending on the proposition, depending on the client, and you try to find the right way to model this rather than set it as a fixed rule and say one offer and then you have to wait for so and so much time.
We can put hard rules in, and very often when we're training a system, we have to do that. So at the beginning, we might put a number of different ways of doing that in. And occasionally within a system, there are very good reasons why we would take step B a certain number of hours or days after step A. We want the customer to receive something. We want them to have the time to look at something. So let's try this after 2 days and let's watch what response we get. And then let's test it after 1 day or 3 days. How does that vary the responses? How does it vary the experience we think we're delivering to the customer? So absolutely fine to put in hard timings, particularly important at the beginning when we're trying to train a system. But we want over time to progress to the point where we're learning from what we're seeing in the system, and the models are saying, try doing it this way. And that's, as I mentioned, specifically in RBS, they had big success, 37% increase in presenting things at the time that was right, not necessarily changing imagery or text, but just picking the time based on what we could see has worked.
I have one question from the head of data and analytics at a large Swiss financial institution, and he asks, probably based on some personal background, how did you transform your organization into so strongly data-driven company? You probably did have to convince many sales and marketing colleagues, I guess. How long did you work on this vision to become reality, and when did this journey start? And I guess that's more related to the RBS case. So how did the organization transformation work?
So when we engage with organizations, we do need to get close to the data and insight guys as quickly as we can, because a decisioning solution literally is as good as the data we can find. So when we work with organizations who are strong data organizations, we know we're going to deliver a strong decisioning capability. Data, we did a piece of research about 4 or 5 years ago. We took our top 10 customers and said, where within the organization is decisioning housed? And at the time, 4 of the clients had decisioning owned within data and insight, data and analytics. 3 were within the customer organization, 2 were within marketing, 1 was in sales. So decisioning can live in different parts of an organization, but crucially, day one task when we're starting a program is to get close to the data organization, understand what data exists and the quality of data, understand what modeling capabilities exist, what the organization wants to learn from, and then how do we consume what is currently available so that we can decision against it. So how do we work with data and analytics? It is 100% crucial that we get close to the data and analytic guys from day one and work with what they have and use it through the decisioning process.
And how do you convince the sales and marketing people who are maybe not that data driven at the start of the journey, who say basically, I want to push this product to all our clients, please put it on the e-banking start page or on the web start page? How do you convince them that it's should be based on data and it should be individual and not just everything to everyone?
I think the success rates relative to the pieces that we send typically speak for themselves. One of an organization that I worked with many years ago, back in 2006, 2007, putting in their NBA decisioning system for the first time, we delivered a desktop to 5,000 call center agents, a little bit like the desktop I showed you for HomeServe. This was a sales organization, 5,000 very aggressive, gregarious salespeople who all knew all about their products, and they were convinced that they would know better than a system. So we put a system in, we trained the agents for 40 minutes, and we said, use this desktop as an option. We think the desktop is going to help you to sell more things, because we think the desktop application is able to predict what the customer is most likely to respond positively to. And for 5,000 agents, after 40 minutes training, we looked at the sales figures after a month. And the first thing we noticed, we had a 78% uptake rate from the call center agents. And we saw an increase in the sales as well. We went back to the sales team in the call center and said, tell us about your experience. You seem to be doing well. What happened? And the response that we got generally was, we didn't think that a system was going to be able to guess what a customer would respond positively to as well as we could. But what we found was the predictions that it was making were helping us to get sales, which helps us to get our commission. So we switched to using the system. And that system is still being used by that client 13 years later. So I think, how do you convince sales organizations? We need to give the solution to the people who are making the sales. We need to deliver it via small projects. As I say, the HomeServe one was delivered over a couple of months. And we need to say, try this. We think you're going to be impressed by how this can help you do your job. Going back to RBS, we can see from their Wheel of Fortune that what they've done over time is actually reduced the number of MBAs they've sent out to customers and targeted them more carefully. And the sales results have improved as a result. So I think what we're seeing is sales improvements through correctly timed next best actions, which are improving the customer experience because the customer is receiving less things, but they are more relevant to the customer, so they're paying more interest, and RBS are getting better results.
Okay, thank you. There is one question that there was an understanding that the central brain is a batch solution. So the question is it possible realistically to make this real time, or is it typically something we say each night I decide what I present the next day?
So I might have misled folks if there's a perception that this is a batch system. So just going back to the slide on the screen again, we work across a number of different interaction types: real-time, event-triggered, batch, third-party. We work with campaigns. As a general movement, we are seeing more and more activity being real-time. So at the point of interaction, we are deciding what is the next best action. That could be the point the customer opens an email. It could be the point the customer looks at a web page. We are increasingly doing real-time decisioning, and real-time decisioning has been around for at least 15 years. Real-time means we're not just pushing out a recommendation in real time, we're learning from responses in real time, and we are pushing out the next best action and the next best action in real time. We've seen a big move over the last few years towards event triggered. So watching what's happening in real time in the data environment, learning from changes to transactional and behavioral data, and triggering something in real time or near real time. Batch is still important. I don't think batch as a delivery style is going to go away. It will reduce. It will continue to reduce. It will be used as part of a contact strategy, but the move is towards real-time and event-triggered. That's where omni-channel next best action decisioning is going to get the biggest returns.
Okay, thank you very much. We are now 1 minute ahead of time. I'm out of questions. I do have many questions to you, but out of the all the questions that our participants have asked have been answered. Maybe one thing that came up in one question is what kind of technology is used in this? Is this do you have to buy a specific piece of technology? Does this integrate into the overall technology stack? Maybe that as a last question.
That's an interesting question. There's always a buy versus build conversation that happens in organizations. This will typically become a buy as opposed to build, because build is quite difficult when you have something which is delivering projects so quickly. It would take quite a long time to build something relative to the time to buy and just get the business benefits quickly. The specific technology that we've been using in RBS and HomeServe and a lot of clients is Pega. I think Pega is recognized and has been for many years as the leading real-time decisioning, next best action decisioning solution. And I think that there are a number of reasons why we like this one. One of the reasons I particularly like Pega is it is able to deliver quickly. So we have many organizations who want to do something in the next best action space, can't articulate to begin with necessarily the scope of what they want, but do have some pain points. So getting in and delivering quickly, Pega is very good at, but also through that first project, through those first 2 or 3 months, helping an organization to describe the scope of what they want to do over time. What we typically find with Pega is if it can be described logically, Pega can deliver it. Clients, organizations typically run out of ideas before Pega runs out of the ability to deliver. So Pega tends to deliver for many years, and a lot of the Pega competitors will run out of ideas before the client does. So it's a good solution to deliver quickly, and it's a good solution to deliver long term.
Okay. Thank you. And now we're really out of remaining questions. So I would like to thank you all. If you have questions about the topic, deeper questions about the cases, about what happened there, feel free to contact me, contact your Namics contact person, and we will get you in touch with Neil and his team. And yeah, thank you very much, and have a good remaining day, and see you soon in home office or real life, and goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.